we all love our families, right? We have more in common than we have apart. And we need stories, particularly stories of heroism, particularly stories of value. And in comic books, or a beautiful piece of Americana. I mean, this is part of the American fabric. And so comic books should be accessible, broadly accessible to anyone, regardless of their ideology. And there's still room for political stories and so forth, but not every story should be forced through this lens of political purity.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for tuning in, whether you're listening at 1 p.m. Central on April 6th in the Central Arkansas area on 101.1 FM The Answer, or online via 1011fmtheanswer.com, or if you're listening later on the podcast version or Krypton Radio or on YouTube or any of the other ways that the show goes out. I'm just so glad to have you. This is a pre-recorded show this week. So today's show is a discussion with Edwin Boyette, who I will tell you a little bit more about here in a second. If you're not familiar with him, just suffice it to say he's a really fascinating guy to talk to, and he's trying to do interesting and positive things to help independent comic book creators, and maybe comic book creators that used to be with the big companies but for whatever reason aren't now. So he's trying to help make sure that their work is highlighted and exposed as well. So I mentioned several times during the radio version of this show that the podcast version was going to have a lot more content. In fact, this has about an extra hour. So if you've already heard the radio version, you know, this is almost a different show. So let me give you an idea of the extra content that is in this podcast version. We talk about what's it like to live in Hawaii, and that actually might be more interesting than you might suspect. Who is Edwin personally? What is his background? We go more into Richard C. Meyer, aka Diversity in Comics, and how that was involved with Edwin becoming involved in what he does. We talk about exploding stuff, including possible beavers. I don't know. You'll just have to see what that's all about. Edwin and I talk about our Christian faith. Also, Edwin and I both share our early history with comics. Edwin shares his qualities to model for success. Those are excellent. We learn what a Geek Containment Unit is. Edwin has some cool stuff cooking with some partners beyond just IndieCron that are really exciting, and he shares some of that. And then last but not least, and this isn't everything, but that gives you an idea of sort of the extra content, we do talk a little bit about this swatting incident that occurred, where somebody calls first responders, SWAT teams or whatever, with a fake call, and people with guns show up at your house. So we talk about that. And also, very importantly, I think Edwin shares some excellent and mature advice on how to deal with the swatting incident if it happens to you. Quick PSA for a local organization, and then a note for a sponsor, and we'll jump in and get talking with Edwin. So, Heroes and Angels Comic-Con. This is a nonprofit. They're having their yearly fundraising Comic-Con. The Heroes and Angels Comic-Con, is going to be Saturday, April 27th, 2019 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Sherwood Forest. Admission is just $3. So here, see, I got this written down on paper here, folks, so it must be important. Heroes and Angels provides non-medical assistance to families affected by childhood cancer and to military families in need. They also provide funding to organizations that research the causes and cures of childhood cancer. So, again, Heroes and Angels Comic-Con is their biggest fundraiser of the year. Come on out Saturday, April 27th, at 10 a.m. Through 4 p.m. at Sherwood Forest, and admission is just $3. And our April 20th, Shane Plays Geek Talk show will have Brandy Bullock and some other folks from Heroes and Angels talking about the con and what they do and all that. So keep your ears open. And I hope to see you at Heroes and Angels Comic-Con on April 27th. It's a great cause, so come on out and have some fun and help these kids these families and military families. So also, now this is a note for a sponsor. 3rd year in a row, I'm partnering up with Arkansas RPG Con. Carl Heil and those guys over there do a fantastic job. Arkansas RPG Con registrations are now open. Head on over to arpgcon.com. That's arpgcon.com for Arkansas RPG Con 2019 on November 9th and 10th. This 2-day event's early bird badge is only $20, which is the same as last year's 1-day event badge. So get them before the price is raised to $30 on July 1st. That's arpgcon.com. Great RPG convention. You show up and I mean, yeah, there's some vendors there, and some other stuff like that, but mainly it's just let's play tabletop role-playing games and have a lot of fun. So, you'll be hearing more about, Arkansas RPG Con for sure in the weeks to come. So here we go. Let's get to the first part of my discussion with Edwin and then break after that and then circle back to the huge bulk of it in the second part later in the show. Edwin is one of those people that define why I like the internet and why I like to do my show. So I get to meet a wide range of people that I otherwise wouldn't meet. And Edwin, I have gotten to meet. Everything has good and bad. And in the middle of the current culture war, one of the positive things is learning about people like Edwin. Now I don't know if we're going to camp out a whole lot on Comicsgate itself during this discussion, but what Edwin is doing in the world of comics books directly relates to Comicsgate. He's got, I'm just going to say the best voice. It's just perfect. He's an intelligent, thoughtful, interesting guy in his own right. But when you add this voice to it, I say it's something like golden honey, aged whiskey. It's got a good fifth of the South in it. It's just fantastic. So, and when you put all these things together, he always has thoughtful things to say. Even when he's engaging in debate, he's respectful about it, which is something I admire very much. Edwin has leadership duties in it's not just a website, but it's done on the web. It's called IndieCron. So hopefully we're going to cover a lot of ground, but mainly the point of this is to give exposure to IndieCron, because stuff like this is what I see as the positive side of skirmishes and things like Comicsgate. People get inventive and they do things to solve problems. And there's a lot of creators out there that Edwin and others like myself want to make sure that the things they're making in the comic book world have a chance to be seen. So, and Edwin is joining us from the lovely state of Hawaii, but I can't remember you're on the Big Island, right? Are you on the Big Island, Edwin?
Well, I was on the Big Island.
Yeah.
And good morning. And
good morning.
Aloha. Aloha from beautiful Hawaii. It is in the morning here when we're speaking, and the sun is on my back.
I see that. Yeah.
I'm looking out the view out my window, and it is just the start of a gorgeous day.
Wow.
And I'm absolutely blessed to be here in Hawaii, and I don't take it for granted.
I've got a couple of friends that live in Hawaii. Both of them are old Air Force buddies, and they've ended up in Hawaii. One, and both of them are just, civilian contractors or whatever now. And, I know a lot of people visit there. Now, here's what I hear about Hawaii. And so you're a longtime resident. I want to see if you can confirm this for me. Hawaii is amazing to visit. It's like a tropical paradise, and it's, all of these things people love to go to Hawaii for. Like I would honestly, ocean's great. I want to go see a volcano. That's the kind of guy I am. But it's a beautiful, beautiful area. It's not one big island. It's a few islands that make up the state of Hawaii. And it used to be I believe a Polynesian kingdom, had a king and all of these things. So it has its own culture beyond, the continental United States. But I've heard, Edwin, that, there's the Scottish comedian Billy Connolly, and he was from Glasgow. And he would say, it's not whether you like Glasgow, it's whether Glasgow likes you. So I've heard the same thing about Hawaii. Like visiting is great, but if you want to live there, some people, live well there, but other people, like, after a while they're like, oh, I gotta go, because it's like, does Hawaii like you, kind of thing? Would you say that that's a true statement?
There can be a barrier for some people.
Right.
There is a distinct culture here. There's kind of a distinct island culture. We're here with their particular hospitality, and
right.
For better or worse, the United States has impinged upon that particular people and that particular culture. Interesting fact, Iolani Palace, which was the seat of the Hawaiian Kingdom, actually had electricity before the White House did.
I did not know that, but yeah, I just heard that. Hawaii is a very interesting background, and there's different people have different takes, I guess, depending on their beliefs or whatever on how Hawaii became a state. But I've heard it's just a really interesting thing, and the knee-jerk reaction is a lot of people say, "Oh, I'd love to live in Hawaii," and then I hear a lot of residents say, "Well, there's like a 3 to 5 year point, which people, if they make it past that, they can be lifelong residents, but not everybody. There's something about that 3 to 5 year mark." So I don't know.
Well, I think where people, and not to go too far
right,
afield, because we are talking about IndieCron, comic books, but what happens, and perhaps this is a good piece of advice for anybody. When you come to a new place and a new culture, we bring all these expectations with us, our own experiences, our own blind spots, our own biases. And people examine new situations and new people in new areas from what they've encountered in the past. And each place has its own unique people and its own distinct qualities. And so people get in this trap of, well, wherever I came from, this is what we had, this is the way we do things.
Right.
But there's a reason you left that place and ventured out somewhere new. And so
I want to back up. That is a life principle that can be applied in so many. Say that again. Can you say that again?
I see there is a reason that you left the place you were and came to someplace new.
Yes, that's quotable right there. So, and if I were to extrapolate from that, don't, if I'm hearing right, when you say like the tension that maybe some people have with a beautiful place like Hawaii, once they live there, because living somewhere is much different from visiting, is, let Hawaii be Hawaii, and don't, okay. So, and aloha. So say aloha and all of that good stuff. So, all right. So moving on, I have what, I'll pull back the veil a little bit. And I think we've already warmed up a little bit, but just to give us a couple more minutes, this is the icebreaker question. Edwin, if you could pick any skill and learn it instantly, think of like you're in the Matrix when Neo says, "Give me Kung Fu," and suddenly he's Kung Fu, or "Let me know how to fly a helicopter." You could learn any skill instantly. What do you think that would be?
I would become a surgeon.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Any particular specialty or why or?
I don't know if there's probably emergency medicine.
Okay.
Because there are people who can in this great degree of stress, they can save lives. So they can give someone a tomorrow, and that is a beautiful and powerful thing.
Wow. Okay. That's a great answer. So speaking of emergency medicine, some people would say that our beloved comic book industry is in distress in a few different ways. And I would say you've been doing some first aid and long-term medical care and emergency surgery since I've known you, trying to help. So, you and I both have a deep love of comics. So sometimes when we react to what the comic book industry is doing and disagree, it's not that because we hate anything. It's because we love the industry and we want it to, flourish and be good. So that leads me right into, we'll just segue. into this. So, Edwin, a lot of people talk about Comicsgate from both sides of the issue. And just for the benefit of people who may not really know or have heard the term but don't really know, in extremely broad strokes, I could describe it, as a comic book industry hashtag movement. But what does the term Comicsgate mean to you, Edwin?
Sure, and there is probably not a concise answer for this, because what I found is everyone who is aware of Comicsgate, from its proponents to its detractors, has their own particular definition and vision of it, which is absolutely fine, as it should be. It's a hashtag, it is a set of principles, but there's no membership card, there's no dues, there's no central body defining what it is, because it's largely kind of this organic movement that sprang up around several nodes, and these nodes consisted of comic book stores closing, bloggers like people like Doug Ernst, who's also a reporter, talking about some of the changes in the comic book industry. And then about 2 years ago, you had several very entertaining YouTubers like Diversity in Comics, Richard C. Myers, who were just doing these great stories. And Richard C. Myers is an interesting guy, because what he's actually giving you is like, he's giving you
this. Now, this is just for people to, this is, for a while, he was Diversity in Comics on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I think he's rebranded as Comics Matter. Is it Comics Matter? Is that his name? But it's kind of interesting because he does these comic book reviews and this comic book commentary. But in reality, what that is that comic book commentary is a wrapper or a delivery vehicle for his particular beliefs about life, his observation, and like this kind of comics dad stories.
Right.
He's a veteran and so forth, been all around the world, been poor and now working his way to wealthy. And so he's sharing these life stories, and the anchor for these life stories are commentary about comic books, and it's very interesting.
He built up quite a following. I've got a friend named Justin who I'm going to use as an example of comics, of where Comicsgate reaches, because it really opened my eyes to the kind of attention that Diversity in Comics, Richard C. Meyer was getting, and Comicsgate in general. I have a friend named Justin I work with, and he is not what I would call a hardcore comic book guy. He loves anime. He loves manga, however you pronounce it. Half the internet out there is now angry at me. And so, I mean, he has diverse, deep, geeky interests, but he's not a mainstream comics guy. But he got so interested in all the discussion going on about Comicsgate, and specifically like, Diversity in Comics. He's familiar with the Bright Wisers. He started buying and backing a lot of these Kickstarters and Indiegogos at first, just because he understood what was going on and he wanted to support these creators. But that has turned into where now he's got more of an eye on comics in general. He came up the other day and he's like, I'm going to support Alterna in this expansion thing. And I'm going to get like the $65 one, and I'll let you go through and pick out some for your kid, And so this is the positive side of Comicsgate, right?
Oh yeah. And you just mentioned Alterna comic books.
Right. All right, that's the first part of our discussion with Edwin Boyette. And as you notice, we were just beginning to talk about Alterna Comics and Peter Simeti and all that. Have no fear. When we resume, we will resume on that note. However, last few weeks, I've been remiss in a popular segment of the show. So we're going to banter with the most amazing producer and board op in Geek Talk Radio, Zach, and then cut to a break. And then when we go back, it's going to be much more Edwin Boyette and Comicsgate and IndieCron and all that good stuff. So let's talk to Zach about the Captain Marvel movie and other things.
Zach, buddy, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. I pre-recorded. It wasn't a replay, but it was a pre-recorded show last week. This weekend is also going to be pre-recorded.
Yes, sir.
This is when this will appear, this wonderful, scintillating conversation that we're having so far. And I got a memo, a critical recommendation from the Mobley Detective Agency. And it said that, things are fairly quiet on the muffin front. If people don't know, the head of our news team, Sal, his grandmother, and it's not Sal, it's his grandmother and her dog Muffin, they get upset if they don't hear from Zach. So Zach, as has been established, they love you very much.
Yes.
I'm just something they have to get through. So last week, they got no Zach. And the Mobley Detective Agency dispatched a communique to me. They actually sent it with a guy with a handcuffed attaché case. Mm-hmm. And I had to give it a retinal and fingerprint and DNA sample before it would pop open. and I pulled out the communique, and it said that, things are still fairly quiet on monitoring. Either Muffin is innocent or Muffin is playing it very close to the vest. Mm-hmm. But, Operation Uno Digits is still underway, and they're not quite sure what all that is. So they recommended not possibly aggravating the situation. So I want to make sure to get you on. Plus, I like talking to my Zach, so got to have some Zach time. I also want to give a shout out the Mobley Detective Agency, Justin Mobley. He knows that I love Jocko, the little weasel of a galactic patrolman in Dragon Ball. Mm-hmm, yeah. And I love that. He's a weasel, but I love him. So he got me the actual Shonen Jump manga book from Akira Toriyama. Cool. Of Jocko the Galactic Patrolman. So thanks very much to the Mobley Detective Agency for that. And it says on the back, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it says includes a special chapter revealing the secret of Goku's origins. Mm. And of course, I'm going to read it right to left, right? Because manga you read right to left. That's okay. Right. All right. Let's banter like mad fiends, Zach. I hear now, talking to Sal is telling me that this Miss Pennyfingers is still working out really well. She was a new hire a couple of months ago and has just been really a go-getter. And, even jobs that aren't hers, she just goes after them and helps everybody. And so I don't know if you've interacted much with Miss Pennyfingers, but from everything I hear, everything's great. So I just wanted to give that a shout. Sal won't stop raving about her. So last weekend, Zach, the lovely Sheila and I went to see Captain Marvel. Oh, yeah, we got to see that. Before I give you my thoughts on it, I think you've mentioned briefly a couple times that you enjoyed it, but what's your take on the movie?
Well, the movie, I really did enjoy the movie. The only, I could say negative I have about the movie, if you want to call it a negative, is that, it had so many cheesy lines in it. That was pretty much it. It's a lot of cheesy lines, like it was a 90s movie, basically. Right. But otherwise, it was a beautiful and it was a fun movie. It was great.
Right. And that's where I land on it. It's entertaining. Exactly. And sometimes that, you go see, we've gotten to where we think that these superhero movies are supposed to be something beyond what they are. Right. And every now and then they can like Infinity War was its own thing. I mean, that's a unique experience. But your average comic book movie is at its basis, it's entertainment. It's escapism. It's entertainment. And I felt that Captain Marvel was very entertaining. It's nowhere near the list of my worst Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and it's also not my favorite. It's just a good, solid, entertaining movie. I call it the Goose movie because I loved everything about Goose, that cat.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I'm all like, the Goose movie, and watching, and it's been out long enough now, I'm not really worried about spoilers, but if people are, plug your ears for a minute or two or jump ahead if you're listening to the podcast version. Sam Jackson running around with a cat on an alien spaceship like it's a gun is beautiful.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and when they go zero G and Goose is like floating upside down and everything. And I didn't know what a flurkin was going into the movie. So when all the aliens are like, that's a flurkin, and they're like edging away and getting real nervous, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? It's a cat. I thought that was just an alien word for cat.
Right.
But, of course, that's not the case. And I love it when Sam Jackson playing Nick Fury, and the de-aging technology looked great.
Mm-hmm.
They run into a couple of bad guys, and he shoves Goose out, and he's like, "Get him, Goose!" And Goose is just like, "Purr." He's like, "Choose a side, man." But it turns out they were really good guys in disguise, so Goose knew what was going on.
Yep.
And I will say that the final after credit scene is now my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe after credit scene.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't know if it was meant to be a troll moment, but to have people literally sit there for a minute long watching a cat hack to have a hairball is beautiful. So, and then of course the big, the Tesseract comes out. So I love that very much.
That's cool.
And then it was cool to see Captain Marvel show up with the Avengers, post Infinity War when she answers the call in that other post-credit scene. So I'll tell you some other stuff I liked. I thought the first 30 minutes or so, when it was basically Star Wars, was great. I was watching it and I was like, Marvel's to the point now where they could just put out sci-fi movies in their universe that don't necessarily involve a superhero.
Right.
Because I really enjoyed all that. And then the final 15 minutes or so where she unleashes her powers was really good. I really enjoyed that. So, she's like Superman level unleashed, like blowing up battle cruisers and grabbing missiles and throwing them around and all that stuff. So, they're saying that she's the most powerful MCU character. I don't know.
And that's what I'm hearing too. Yep.
Yeah. And so here's some interesting stuff.
Oh, and we were just really getting into some good stuff with our theories and speculation on what might happen with Ant-Man and Captain Marvel in Avengers Endgame, which evidently has like a running time of 3 hours. It's going to be a crazy movie. Anyway, for time purposes, we're going to play part 2 of that Zach banter segment next week. But I want to make sure to get back to Edwin. A lot of ground to cover. And like I said, the podcast version of the interview with Edwin will probably have about another hour's worth of material. So I'm about to get us to a break. Before we do that, I want to throw out some love at a sponsor. Comic book lovers, head to Michael Tierney's local comic book stores for the newest books on the shelves, plus a fantastic selection of back issues. Visit the comic book store on Treasure Hill Road in Little Rock and Collector's Edition on JFK Boulevard in North Little Rock. And don't forget to click on over to thewildstars.com. Michael Tierney knows comics. In addition to being in business for nearly 4 decades and publishing his own comic book series, The Wild Stars, for almost as long and still going, he has written multiple columns for comics magazines and is an Overstreet Price Guide advisor. Michael is also the author of the wildly successful, high-quality 4-volume labor of love, The Edgar Rice Burroughs 100-Year Art Chronology. Remember, for all of your comic book needs, with friendly service, make sure to visit the comic book store on Treasure Hill Road in Little Rock, Collector's Edition on JFK Boulevard in North Little Rock, and thewildstars.com to learn more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. And if you do visit, either in person or online or whatever, any of my sponsors, please let them know that you heard them on Shane Plays.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Troll Lord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today.
Located in Little Rock, Mustard Seed Moving offers the most reliable and most affordable moving services in the area, with the widest variety of services, including local moves, moves across city or state lines, office moving, and home moving. They'll move your house, your apartment, your office, piano, gun safe, copy machine, tanning bed, rotting lawnmower, and more. Mustard Seed Moving's staff are highly qualified experts and professionals that have years of experience in the moving business, and every team member cares about their clients and providing them with the most excellent service available. Mustard Seed Moving knows the proper way to handle all your priceless and precious possessions, from delicate to obscure or oversized, so you can be sure your belongings are safe in their care. Contact Mustard Seed Moving 501-529-7171 to get your free quote or estimate today. Their operator is available around the clock for your convenience, so call 501-529-7171 for Mustard Seed Moving today.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Remember, today is a pre-recorded show. It's quick show notes, and then we will get back into our discussion with Edwin Boyette about comic books and IndieCron.com and Comicsgate and all of that good stuff. Some quick show notes. You can always tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. And I love to get your tweets. Show notes and links for today's show will be up on ShanePlays.com. That's ShanePlays.com for the podcast and Krypton Radio and YouTube version when all that goes out in a few days. The show, as I've mentioned, does go out as a podcast on the blog at ShanePlays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube, and many other places. And last but never ever least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. KryptonRadio.com. Normally I read a different ad for show sponsor Game Goblins. This week I wanted to highlight something that they had put on Facebook. I thought it was good to let people know about. Remember Game Goblins? They're over in West Little Rock, Bowman and West Canis, right there. Where's it? Canis and West Bowman. Anyway, it's right there where Senor Tequila, and there's a Subway, Taekwondo, there's a ATA Taekwondo. Right across the road, there's a new Lowe's. There's a tropical smoothie. So it's right there in that shopping center. And it's a great destination for role-playing games and board games and Warhammer. But one of the things they mentioned recently that I wanted to highlight for them is Game Goblins needs your Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and Dragon Ball Super cards. And they've got plenty of cash. That's right. CASH. Money talks, everything else walks, cash to buy them. They're big fans of transparency, so their buy list is public and updated weekly. That way you know what to expect before you sell and can avoid getting sharked. That's their words. Maybe that's a cool hip lingo in the collectible trading card game world. I used to be pretty big into Magic, but it's been a long time. All right. You can find their buy lists at GameGoblins.com. So go to GameGoblins.com. There's a link up there that says buy lists for several different games, and there's the amount listed is the cash offer. But it looks like that if you take store credit, you'll get an even higher amount on the offer. So go check that out, GameGoblins.com. So now it's back to our interview with Edwin Boyette of IndieCron.com, among other things that he's doing. And we're going to resume our conversation talking about Alterna Comics and Peter Simeti. We'll talk about IndieCron.com, what that website is and how it helps you find cool comic books and help gets exposure to comic book creators. So anyway, let's get back to Edwin.
Alterna Comic Books is a small publisher that is run by this beautiful man named Peter Simeti.
Yeah.
Now he's got a diverse heritage. I believe one of his parents is Asian and another one of his parents is Italian. Just a beautiful man. Has a very gentle and enthusiastic voice.
He does.
And he is, I don't want to call him fragile, but he is an entirely, he doesn't put up this facade with people or wear this mask or this persona. He is a very genuine, very unfiltered man. who is very gentle, who loves comic books and loves comic book readers, and wants to be able to give them something that they will value, entertain them, and bring something better to their lives, some joy. His kind of mission is to increase the amount of available joy in the world.
Right. And that's, I've because of Comicsgate, I now am much more aware of alternate comics and bought a couple to check them out. And due to a few factors, up to and including the enjoyability and quality of the stories, I'm now, like, I'm getting it. It came out on a Wednesday regularly, which is a bi-monthly anthology. I just picked up, I think it's The Regular Joe. I think I corrected myself later in the interview, but the name is The Actual Roger, not The Regular Joe. Which is about a kid that gets superpowers and teamed with, I think it's The Regular Joe. It's The Regular something. I just read it last night. Who gets teamed with basically the Superman of that universe who doesn't want a sidekick. And he Alterna publishes a wide variety of titles. And I want to make it clear, Alterna's been around for a few years. I think they just had their 10th year anniversary. But due to just everything going on in the comic book world, people looking for alternatives to the big two titles, and combined with Peter's marketing strategy, and he's just a darn nice guy, and the quality of his content, Alterna is suddenly just, getting a lot of visibility. And I'm so glad. To add on to what you were saying about Peter and his approach, one, he's a super nice guy. And I have a laundry list of things that if I were going to try to save the comic book industry, I would do. And he's doing a lot of them. Like it's go ahead.
Can I say one thing? I say one thing?
Yeah.
You said nice guy, and sometimes that has some negative connotations.
Okay, sure.
Sometimes nice is perceived as kind of like a small little dog.
Oh,
that rolls over and shows you its belly and tries to look real cute so nobody will try and harm it. What I would say about Peter is that Peter is an authentically and genuinely joyous spirit and a good man.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take that. Yeah. Total great. Yeah. Cause nice guy's like, oh, he's a nice guy, whatever. It's like, so the way, like, I try to be nice. Right. I mean, I've been elected to public office twice, and I was the first Republican to be elected Justice of the Peace, which is basically a county commissioner in my district ever. Now, I'm a nice guy, but you don't get that by being a little friendly dog. So the way I put it is I prefer nice, but I don't, that doesn't mean I'm a pushover. Right. But I prefer nice. Right. So, and I would kind of classify even yourself and Peter the same way. It's like, we prefer nice as our default position, friendly, respectful. If we have to debate, we still try to keep it friendly and principled about the issues rather than the people. But if you pull us down into the pit, we'll, don't be surprised at what happens next. So, but we'll talk about this later if you want. And I don't want to go into this right now, but you got swatted, and I bragged on you online. Your response to being swatted was loving and mature and rational and non-hysterical. And we need more of that in online discussions. That's all I can say, because I know inside you had to be like, I'd be upset if police hit my house with my wife and son there. So, and we could talk about that later. I don't want to go into that now. I'll give you an opportunity later. If you want to talk about the swatting, you don't have to, but it's that kind of response and that kind of approach that we need more of, like a respectful, even when the situation is not respectful, approach. So, did you want to add anything to that before I move on, or?
Well, all kinds of things are going to happen to us, right? We're going to encounter unpleasantry in the world. In reality, very few things are under our control.
This is true.
The sole thing that is always under our control, if we choose it, are ourselves.
How we respond. That's
How
absolutely
we
right.
respond, our emotional reactions, the way we treat people, the patience that we're willing to extend to them. And I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I'm a Christian, and I take my faith very seriously. It's not a tertiary part of who I am. It is the primary part.
Right.
The best part.
Right. And if you know, as a Christian, I can say it's really the only really good part, right? Yeah. Nothing is good other, besides, I'm not good on my own. I need God. So,
Absolutely.
Well, it shines through, man. And, I'm a Christian as well. I don't use Shane Plays Geek Talk as a platform for a weekly gospel message, but when it naturally comes up, I have no problem saying that, Christ is my savior, God is real, all of that. And it is my most important thing. It's not just 1 hour on Sunday, I check off a box and move on. It should direct everything. And that actually leads into one of the things I was going to say or ask you. And I said, I know you from Twitter and YouTube, and it's your comic book side that I normally see. So I love the fact that you purposefully deviated into your faith, which is not something that I think the larger cultural discussion and culture war or whatever. Christianity is not a garment you can put on and take off. I mean, it's there. Now you could choose how you express it in certain ways, but if you're not we're not called to be, we're called to be salt and light. We're not called to be, mood lighting and sugar, right? So at certain times as a Christian, if people aren't reacting to you a little like, whoa, then you're not really shining, right? Because, Christianity and the world system are diametrically opposed. And most people don't want to put it that way, but it's true. So, but anyway, on that, it says, I'd actually written down here, I said, no, we're also both Christians. So I know your comic book side. I know you from Twitter. I know you from YouTube, and these amazing audio trailers. Do I have your permission when I edit this show to play your Trump Space Force audio trailer, which is the best thing that's ever happened?
Absolutely.
Okay. Edwin said I could play it, so here it is. Folks, this is absolutely one of the best things to ever happen, period.
It's another lonely night, and you need it bad. We've got all the mecha you need. Bipedal hydraulic lunar functionality for your pleasure. And if you're a real nasty woman, you might even get to see the vertical takeoff and landing capabilities. Oh, yeah. Trump Space Force, making space great again.
You're doing these wonderful trailers and Instagram videos and everything. I love the one you recently did for Red Rooster. You could have a whole career in that if you wanted to, man. But other than that, I don't really know. Who is Edwin Boyette? What do you do? And how did you get so deep into the culture war as it applies to comic books?
All right. Well, I grew up in small town North Carolina. I am a military brat. And we have a military tradition that goes back generations in my family. Both my grandfathers were at Normandy Beach.
Oh, wow.
My father did some interesting things for the United States Army. When I came of age, I've actually got quite a bit of a temper, and so the Army was a very good place for me. So I joined as an infantryman, and then I spent 8 years in the 10th Mountain Division. And so I deployed to Egypt and Sinai. I deployed to Bosnia for some peacekeeping missions. And that was a valuable chapter in my life. Taught me how to deal with difficult situations, potentially life-ending or life-taking situations. and it gave me some useful perspective. After I got out of the Army, I came out to Hawaii, had an opportunity to come out here to Hawaii about 20 years ago.
Okay, I was wondering. So you're a Hawaii native resident now. I mean, you are Hawaii now.
Well, some people, I don't want to claim anything I shouldn't.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that
my wife is a native Hawaiian woman.
Okay.
And I work for a Hawaiian family and go to church at a pretty diverse church. It's a non-denominational Baptist church, but it's packed full of Hawaiians, Samoans, Japanese. It's a beautiful reflection of this rich island culture we have here. And these people that come from all different kinds of backgrounds, but have still managed to both preserve their individual cultures, but share in a particularly unique Hawaiian island culture.
Well, you mentioned the diversity of people in churches, or in your church. We were just talking about this last Sunday in our small group. The first time that Christians are referred to as Christians was in Antioch, and that was the first church that was mixing Gentiles and Jews that's recorded. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't say directly that's why they were called Christians, but they had a church that was, and this was mind-bogglingly crazy to have Jews or the Jewish people and Gentiles worshiping together. That was mind-bogglingly crazy at that time. But like within a verse or two, it says it was at Antioch where they were first called Christians. So
do something after this stream.
Okay.
Go to and preferably the King James Version, but go to Acts chapter 2 and listen about look at the scripture there very closely, because it talks about the people being witnessed to there. And it talks about believing Jews from all nations.
Right, all nations. Yeah, you're like, which before that verse was probably a complete non sequitur. So, yeah. I don't think people understand, they talk about xenophobia or whatever these days. God had literally told the Jewish people, be apart, and they took that seriously. So, okay, anyway, I could do a... Yeah.
Sorry for the tangent.
No, I love it. I could do a whole. I've thought about doing a secondary Christian topic show called Pilgrim Pages, because I was going to have a website about pilgrim pages that just recorded my journey as a pilgrim on the Christian life, not pretending that I know everything. And so if I ever have time, free time, Edwin, gut laugh, I'd love to do a podcast just here's my thoughts on the journey, and it's going to be messy and, but anyway, moving on. All right. So how did you, go ahead. Yeah.
I didn't finish to answer your question.
Yeah.
After the army, I'm about 30 years old. Well, a little bit younger than that. And I come out to Hawaii, to become an environmental consultant.
Okay.
About 7 years ago, a demolition company needed somebody who was very familiar with the laws and regulatory compliance. And so I love this particular family.
Okay.
Go to church with them and so on. And so I accepted that, and then got more involved in the construction and demolition field. So I get to work with a lot of hard chargers, a lot of big boys, and I get to knock stuff down.
That's
so
fun.
It's a lot of fun.
That's cool. All right. So that would super cool. There's a guy at work. I'm in Little Rock, the Little Rock area, and one of the guys that I work with, and we're in information services, so we're sitting there at computers all day programming and stuff. But one of the guys I work with, he's got a lot of land, and there's a stream on that land, and he's having a huge beaver battle right now. And the guy that sits right next to him, this is Arkansas, and I love Arkansas, I'm not making fun of it. The guy that sits right next to him is currently working on getting his dynamite license. So, and so we're all sitting there working on Microsoft code, talking about beavers and dams and dynamite. And I keep, every day I'm like, when's this dynamite license coming? Because I don't necessarily want beavers to die, but I sure as heck want to see this dynamite take out this beaver dam. So, but anyway, so at what point, what's your history with comic books? And at what point did you look around and realize you were in a culture war.
Okay. So I have to go back in time with that.
Okay.
So my mother was a children's librarian.
Cool.
Before I learned how to read, she kept a record. She read almost 800 books to me before I started kindergarten and learned how to read.
Wow.
And so as soon as I learned how to read, I could read very quickly. And in the era when I grew up, you didn't go to a comic book store. In fact, I don't think I went into my first comic book store until I was in my late 30s. Every gas station, every 7-Eleven, every Piggly Wiggly, every grocery store.
Did you ever see a Mad Butcher? We had a Mad Butcher.
I've never seen a Mad Butcher.
Yeah, we had a Mad. It's a Kroger. It's a Kroger now, but it was a Mad Butcher in the 70s.
Oh,
yeah.
That's amazing. It's a great name.
Yeah.
But every one of these places, somewhere near the front, had a thing called a spinner rack. And a spinner rack is a stand. It's a circular stand that's about 6 feet tall, and you can turn it. And it's got all these little pockets where, comic books can be turned. So imagine you're 6 years old. This thing is twice as high as you are, and you're spinning it. And there's all these stories of adventure and strange stuff and all kinds of great stuff. And you just go in, and at the time, comic books were about like a quarter, for 50 cents. I think I could get a 16-ounce Coca-Cola in a glass bottle with a pop top.
Yep.
And a comic book. And it was a good day. I didn't even know that comic books were a geeky thing until I was in my late 30s. It was just I grew up in a small town.
Right.
And so some of these divisions, we were all from a small town. We all went out and played. This is before, even when we started getting like Ataris and Super No Friendos, you might play that for an hour, and then you would go out and do stuff. Go out and do stuff. But everybody had some beat up comic books.
Were you raised in the generation it was like your parents didn't necessarily know where you're at, just be home by a certain time? We ran like wild when I was a kid.
Yeah. As long as you were down. Long as but here's the thing. Everybody in the town knew who you were.
Right.
And so I grew up in an era. I grew up in an era. I grew up in an era where the neighbors might spank you if you were messing up.
Right.
And nobody would think twice about that. And if you got into trouble, somebody might be calling your parents before you could even make it home on your bike.
Right. That's the true definition of it takes a village, not that the village has more precedence for your child than you do. So, but anyway, you were talking about, well, let me touch on that. When I started getting into comics was in the early 80s. And I think they were about 60 cents then, because I remember when they went to 75 cents, and that was a big deal to me. But yeah, I would go to the convenience store. I lived on Little Rock Air Force Base for a while, and they called the convenience store the Shopette, and I would ride my bike up there, and I'd hit the spinner rack. That was my main source of comics, and I'd hit the spinner rack, and I could get a couple of comic books and a Yoo-hoo or whatever, and like some kind of little snack cake or something, and I'd go out and I would plop my rear down in front of the convenience store, set up against it, and read my couple of comic books and eat my snack, and that was one of my favorite things to do. And you were talking about not necessarily being geeky. When I was growing up, every kid had a pile of comic books. And there would be times where they'd say, hey, bring your comics over. So you'd bring your comics over, and they'd bring their comics out. And however many kids were there would just read comics. Oh, this one's good, and hand it to the next guy, and you just read comics. It's like everybody had comics because they were easy to get, and they didn't cost $20. So, which comes back to Alterna, some of the stuff they're doing, I 100% agree with, which is they're trying to get them in more locations, and they're trying to get that cover price down. So,
that's a big point. That's a big point. Comic books now from Marvel or DC comic books cost, the low price ones are $4, $3.99.
Right.
Most of the Marvel comic books now, I believe, are $4.99. You can get any single comic book from Alterna Comic Books for, I believe, $1.50. Is that the current price?
The regular Joe, or I can't remember, regular Roger, that's it. The actual Roger, that's the name of the comic book. $1.50, baby. And that makes it really easy to take a risk on. It's $1.50, right?
Yes.
And even their anthology, which is like double sized and comes out once every other month, bi-monthly, is $1.99. Now, they print on newsprint. The outside cover is glossy and all that, but everything on the inside is newsprint, which is fine with me. Now, it might not be fine with everybody, but for decades and decades and decades, comics were on newsprint, and that was fine. And in today's world, if something's really in demand, we could probably get it reprinted in a higher quality trade, paper. And it's like if I want to have the actual Roger 50 years from now, then hopefully they'll put out a trade. But I don't have to have every issue in this super high quality gloss paper. And I don't want to go too far down because I want to talk about IndieCron. We are going to get to IndieCron, I promise. And Edwin, just so you know, I'll edit this down to the salient parts for the radio show, but then I'll probably put out a podcast version that has everything. So those that want to listen to everything can. But so the radio show will focus more on IndieCron. But anyway, when comics being a geeky thing, in the 80s anyway, it was when you were still heavily into comics after a certain age, is when it, quote unquote, from what I observed, became geeky. But comics were a part of everybody's life, I would say, like from like 12 years old down. Right. And then it kind of changed. That's what I perceived and experienced.
Oh, somewhere at that point. Well, okay. So somewhere about the time that I'm 11 years old, we moved around a little bit because my father was active duty.
Right.
And I made this real good friend, Spencer, and his father had kept all his comic books. So over the course of a summer, when we would, have like sleepovers and then go run around in the woods in the evening, when we would come back, his father would let us, make us wash our hands.
Right.
And move away any sugary snacks or any drinks like that. And sat down and read these early Fantastic Four. Read the original, the original Daredevil. These old Captain Americas, all these comic books from the 50s and 60s and early 70s. And, it was amazing. It was amazing just to be able to sit down and kind of binge read all this stuff.
Right.
And then a few years later, you've got all this cool stuff happening in comic books. You've got Todd McFarlane. You've got Rob Liefeld. I remember loving New Mutants when I was a kid, but all this groovy stuff happening in Marvel and with the Image Boys. And at that point, my brothers were old enough to read. My younger brothers were old enough to read. So we would all kind of share together and build up our collection. And it was just something I could share with my brothers. And when I went to the Army, I just gave all the long boxes to my brothers. And my middle brother still has all our long boxes. My youngest brother has actually built in his eldest son's room. One wall is totally covered with like action figures, and he's made like all these cool displays for his sons. And so it's something that's been passed down.
Nice.
It's passed down. Yeah. It's very cool. And there's nothing geeky about that per se. It's stories. Mm-hmm. And these stories of heroes are man's oldest stories, right? You think about Samson, you think about David, right? Even Moses in one aspect. You think about the Epic of Gilgamesh. You think about these Nordic stories, right? The epic, what is it? The Venus? I forget. But the stories of Thor and Odin, and every culture has these Hercules, a pantheon of heroes, even ordinary men pushed to extreme circumstances. And these are the stories that have persisted for hundreds and thousands of years. I mean, every kid beyond a certain age may still be acquainted with Robin Hood, with King Arthur, with all these different mythological, larger-than-life stories. There's nothing geeky about this. This is fundamental human behavior.
Right. I got you. No, definitely. It's just that and comic books aren't a genre; it's a medium. At some point, the medium of comic books, was not geeky necessarily, but nerdy after a certain age. But then really I attribute a lot of this to Kevin Smith's movies. And other, it's brought comic books into mainstream. The comic book culture and geeky culture is now somewhat mainstream, and I don't put it just at Kevin Smith's feet, but his kind of thing, and Big Bang Theory and all these other things happening have kind of brought it much more mainstream. And
you mentioned the Little Rock Comic Book Institute.
yeah.
for artistic achievement.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Brightwisers.
Great people.
That Red Rooster story they've got, that character in that mythos.
Yeah.
That is amazing stuff, and that taps into some of these legends, and Mitch and Betty are so, or I guess I should say Mitch and Elizabeth Brightweiser.
Right.
Two of them have so much talent concentrated in two of them. I'm looking at Mitch's stuff, and I'm like, you're a modern day watercolorist, master watercolorist pretending to be a comic book artist.
Yep. See, before Red Rooster came along, we had a Little Rock Comic Expo, I think. I'm trying to remember what it was called. LR Little Rock Comic. Anyway, it's been 2 or 3 years since we've had it here. A guy named Brent Douglas runs it, and it's really great. But I was doing some cross promotion with them, and the week before that convention, I was like, Brent, why don't you get some of your guests on that are going to be at the show next week, and we'll have them on the radio, and we'll pump, the Little Rock Comic Expo, and then it's Little Rock Comic. Man, I can't believe it's LRCC, so somehow I'm messing it up. So quick footnote, it's actually the River City Comic Expo, RCCE. Little Rock Comic Con is a separate thing, and I've enjoyed working with both. And anyway, so as I was talking about yesterday, Edwin, and I'm well past 30, but about 30, the warranty starts expiring, right? So there's, something new every day. You're like, I guess the warranty expired on that. But anyway, the point is, that was my first introduction to Mitch and Elizabeth. They came on the show along with Jeffrey Nodelman, who lives in the local area now. And his animation studio actually produced the Venture Brothers. He's a very interesting guy. And he's in the Little Rock area now. So, but anyway, I met Mitch and Elizabeth, and from there I got to know them even before all the Comicsgate and Red Rooster and all that exploded. But as I've gotten to know them, they are two fine folks. And I've had the pleasure of at local conventions, Mitch will just walk in and start drawing, of watching him work, and he's so casual about it. But to come back to the and Elizabeth is amazing. I've had a show with Brett R. Smith on comic colorists. Coloring is so important. I've had really good conversations with Elizabeth about the importance of coloring to comic books. It's an art of its own. So I'm trying to bring exposure to colorists, to letterers, inkers. It's all vastly important.
Oh, that's good stuff. Oh, and then, okay, so this gives me a good segue.
Right.
You asked me how I got involved in the culture war. And so I read comic books as a kid, shared them with my brothers. When I was in the army, when I was in Bosnia, go out on these missions and see all these terrible things and do all these things. And then so we had a little shopette on our little base. So
was it the Four Seasons or the shopette? You know what they called it?
So this little base we were on in Bosnia, we had, a little convenience store run by the army.
Right.
And so after missions, after I had got everything squared away, I'd go buy myself a dozen comic books, kick back on my bunk, and get a little escape from the grim reality of my surroundings and the things that had been done there.
Gee, Edwin, it's almost like you're saying you enjoyed comics for escapism, entertainment, and not as social conditioning.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. All right.
All right. So when I got here to Hawaii, life got kind of busy, and I hadn't realized how much things had changed. When I got here to Hawaii, I all of a sudden realized that, hey, you can't walk into a grocery store or a convenience store anymore and just grab some comic books. You have to go to some temple devoted,
Right.
devoted, and you have to go through these arcane rituals in order to obtain a comic
Well,
book.
the direct market was both the best thing to happen to comics, and it's also now become the worst thing to happen to comics.
Yeah,
As far as the diamond distribution model.
It is very cool to have it concentrated like that, but on the same token, it removes it from the view of the average person, right? It's kind of comic book stores.
You have to seek it out.
Like,
It doesn't come to you anymore. You have to seek it out.
they're geek containment units to keep those geeks away from good normal people.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, you were talking about spinner racks earlier, and here's a little piece of trivia that you may or may not know. First of all, I agree with you. I want spinner racks everywhere. I would love to have spinner racks on the side of the street like a bus stop, for goodness sakes. I want comics everywhere. But did you know, you remember comic books in the 80s and 90s and before that? If you looked at the comic book from the top, like literally looked top down on a comic book on the thin side, do you remember those little colored stripes that ran across the top of the pages?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what those were for?
I do not know.
That was color coded because most of the poor schleps delivering all those comics to comic book spinner racks did not read comics, didn't know what came out when, and that was color coded. If you saw one color, you pulled it out of the spinner rack, and then you put the new that week's in, and it was a different color. So that was easy for the person that was keeping the spinner rack updated to know what to put in and when to pull it.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool.
I love stuff like that. Yeah.
No,
so,
that is.
All right. So anyway, you were reading comic books as escapism.
Yes.
And then you came back to the States and realized that, we've siloed, it was for good reasons and motives. I'm sure I don't want to go into all that, but going to the direct retail market, and I don't want comic book stores to go away. Let me be very clear. I've gone to the same Michael Tierney here in Little Rock, who owns 2 comic book stores, the comic book store in Little Rock and Collector's Edition in North Little Rock. He's actually a sponsor of the show and also a friend. I walked into his comic book shop for the first time in 1985 when I was 12 or 13. And I've stayed with him ever since. And comic book stores serve a very good purpose. I would love to see comic book stores be the premium store for comic books, to where you can get premium versions or collectibles or this or that, or they'll do your reserve list for you. But I want comic books back in spinner racks and back in grocery stores and all that.
When I walk into a comic book store these days, I'm primarily purchasing back issues. Like, I don't know if you can see this, but I got this from a store just the other day.
Yep. I love that. Yep.
And that's Captain America 128, 15 cents. He's battling like this biker gang. It's great. And, it's not a collector grade comic book. It
doesn't matter. You want it.
And dog-eared, but that's why I want it. I don't want to look at it and frame it. I want to be able to page through it and enjoy it.
Yeah, my dirty little secret, and this always makes the comic book people aghast. Now, Michael's used to it, but if I walk into another comic book store and buy something and they say bags or boards, I say nope. And there's this like, almost like a Philistine, and less than 1% of my comics do I preserve that way. Most of them are purely for reading. And I don't care if they get beat up and messed up and all that. That's a product of my upbringing because, when a comic book was 50 cents or whatever, it'd get dog-eared or the cover ripped off, or you'd stick it in your pocket. It didn't matter. But there's a few comics that I will put away and preserve in that fashion.
Well, I would definitely put away some of those Red Roosters.
Oh, Red Rooster.
By the Brightwisers. I would, yeah.
Well, my Trump's Space Force, my Hero Macadamia, those are definitely.
Oh, my wife loves Trump Space Force. I'm
Yeah.
looking across the way on her rack, and we both contributed to that particular project, and she's got her Make Space Great Again.
Great again. Yeah. That's such good stuff. Tim and Mark and company are having, and Chuck and all of them are having so much fun with all of that.
And
anyway,
I think Tim Lim is getting ready to do another Black Ops, and I love that. I loved Black Ops.
Man, boy, yeah, I'm gonna say this real short and move us on, because I mean we're already using up most of your time, and we still got to talk about IndieCron. Black Ops, I absolutely loved because they played it straight.
Oh yeah,
right?
it's beautiful.
Yeah,
and I took it down to the. I made sure my local comic book store ordered plenty extra. I told them what it was about and so forth, and they loved it. They loved it. They're like, "Oh, the Murder Bunny."
Yeah. Well, I like it. It has the first RPG, the rocket or the rabbit propelled grenade. So Leapin' Lagomorphs. It's USAGI. But anyway, yeah. I mean, Tim, as you put it, the Little Rock Comic Book Institute Collective. I'm like, how is this happening right here in Little Rock? There's all this great talent doing this cool stuff. But I mean that's been talked about a lot by you, I'm sure. But I mean, if you want to add to that, feel free. But I'm trying to move us on to IndieCron.
Sometimes when you get the right people together,
right,
and you just have to you don't have to wait for anybody's permission. If you've got the talent and you've got the drive, and if you've got the drive, you can probably acquire the talent. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You don't have to get anybody to check a box for you. You just roll up your sleeves and you get busy making stuff. And if you've got passion, if you've got authenticity, then you can make something that people are going to love.
I agree. Yeah, it's a lot of it. You just got to get out there and make it happen. Now, this doesn't completely speak to your point, but it's a close cousin. I love Mitch Breitweiser shared with me, and I'm sure he shared with you, and I'm sure he's said it publicly before. The way he got into the industry is he just picked up, moved to New York City, and would sneak in to the Marvel Comics offices every day with some kind of elevator, service elevator or something. And then he would go and slip samples of his work under the editor's doors and then sneak back out. And eventually he got a job doing that. So
there's at least four distinct qualities there that can be modeled. One, if you want to do something big, you're going to have skin in the game. You've got to take a risk. 2, boldness. 3, persistence. 4, always seeking out an opportunity, right? And putting yourself in the position to take advantage of the opportunities that arrive. Oh, very important qualities.
Right. And on top of that, those are crucial. Now, you do have to have talent in what you're trying to do. So if I went to New York and I kept slipping stick figure drawings, I probably, unless they were looking for a silly backup feature in the bullpen section, probably would not get called on that. So unfortunately, I do believe in chasing your dreams, but talent plays a factor too. So
there are people who have selected the right parents.
Right. Yeah, I liked how you put that. Yeah, that is great.
People, the endeavors that they have lent their hands to, they were particularly well suited for, or well equipped for. For the rest of us, we have to pick something and practice at it. Practice at it, and don't just practice mindlessly, but get someone to give you feedback, get someone to model. This is very important. Directed and supervised practice is a very potent combination to improve your skill at any particular endeavor or, anything that you might want to manifest. You want to get better at sawing up logs, then find yourself a very skilled lumberjack,
right?
And have him give you periodic feedback, right? But if you want to get good at something, you're going to have to do it, and do it in a mindful and organized fashion. Yeah,
those are all great points. I would also add to that very, 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 very rarely is somebody an overnight success. Very rarely. So, you've got to learn to get back up when you've taken a massive gut punch. You have got to learn to get back up. Sometimes the difference between one person who succeeded and one person who didn't is the person who succeeded got up one more time than the guy who didn't. Sometimes that's the only difference.
You're a fellow who looks like he enjoys a full belly. I do,
sir.
Have you ever enjoyed the crunchy, savory goodness of some Kentucky Fried Chicken? Have you ever had one of the Colonel Sanders drumsticks in your greasy mitts?
You know, I am an enlistee in the Colonel's regiment.
The Colonel actually started that particular person actually started that later in life. I want to say, and I'm working with the aging and faulty memory. But if I
is the warranty expired?
Yeah. I want to say he was rejected over 1,000 times before he was successful with that particular venture. So many people closed doors in his faces. So many people said no, and he just persisted until someone said yes, and now the world is a richer place for having Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, man. When I was growing up, a Kentucky Fried Chicken run, especially those mashed potatoes and gravy, was a big deal in our family. We're going to get some KFC. We didn't call it KFC then. It was Kentucky Fried Chicken, and it was finger licking good. Another great example, and then we're going into IndieCron after this, I promise. Another great example of persistence is, I can't believe it. Was it Edison that made the light bulb?
Oh, yeah.
I believe it took him 200 tries to find the right material for the filament to light up in a light bulb. And at one point, and his son relates this story, at one point his, lab, work, whatever it was, factory burnt down. And his son showed up while the fire was going on, and he saw his father looking at the fire, and the heat from the fire, his son distinctly remembers, was making his father's hair kind of wave in the wind. You know, those heat waves. Oh yeah. And so he's like, what could my father possibly be imagined looking on his live stream burning down? And and then the next day, do you know what happened?
He probably got a shovel out and got back to work.
His son relates that he got up and said, back to work. And yeah. And I guess insurance money or whatever helped rebuild some of it, or whatever, but there was no change in his attitude. He's like, this is a setback like anything else, back to work, because his eye was on the goal of where he wanted to go. You know, his eye wasn't on what, but anyway, okay. So getting to IndieCron at some point, you know, Edwin, you did like what a lot of people do, whether it's getting into politics or getting into the culture war or becoming an activist or whatever it is that people do. You went from being an observer and a spectator into, I'm going to step across the line and I'm going to get involved on some level. Now, sometimes people look around and realize, oh, I'm in the trenches and I didn't even realize it, but I'm here now. And then some people say, I'm getting in. So, like, what was your transition point?
Well, I started listening, I guess about 3 years ago. I got back into comic books, and I was picking up an issue here or there, and didn't find myself enjoying them as much as I thought I would. And so I started casting around and started consuming some of this content, and then, like I say, I guess it's been about 2 years ago now, stumbled across Diversity in Comics. Richard C. Meyer.
So no, we're back to Richard C. Meyer. Big influence on the movement.
And he started talking about all these things. And so I started commenting on videos and so forth. And I enjoyed it to a degree, but I only have so much room for passive activity in my life. You know, I need need to be engaged in something, making something,
Yes.
furthering something. I like doing things. I mean,
Right.
there's a place for me to sit down and read something and enjoy it for some escapism. But for most of my life, I want it to be in active pursuit of some particular goal, making things better, sharing things that I'm excited about. But I want to be active in something. So one of the first things I did is I had been making some videos for some other things, just on a very small scale. I was engaged in, and it's now this is unequivocally nerdy. I helped one of my friends who ran a role-playing game on Twitch.
Yay!
Would come on and do some of the voices for him. And
Okay,
so
I got it, because I'm a big tabletop role-playing game nerd. I would say Shane covers comic books and tabletop role-playing about equally. So what game was it?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm looking across at my bookshelf, and there is a monster manual on my bookshelf.
Okay, so it was some flavor of Dungeons and Dragons. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
And then I ran a couple of campaigns for people and kind of did that.
Oh, wait. Edwin Boyette is a tabletop role player?
Yeah.
Oh, you're coming back on the show sometime to talk about that. Anyway, go ahead.
And we did that on YouTube and live streamed them, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot. And then that is unequivocally, unapologetically geeky.
Yeah,
but even,
I love it.
Even role-playing games. I learned about role-playing games from my uncles, and they were all these big biker-looking football player, redneck kind of hooligans. And I didn't know any of this stuff was really geeky until I got older. I thought it was just stuff people did and enjoyed.
Right. Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So that was kind of my transition. And so as when Diversity in Comics and his team launched the Jawbreakers comic book, I just made like a goofy little promo video for it, kind of like a takeoff on the A-Team, and just started running from there and started talking about stuff. And I realized that I enjoyed commenting on this stuff and putting it in front of other people. Now, at the same time, I became aware that there was an actually ideological, political, cultural war that was taking place in mainstream comic books, and it took two shapes. One was that because of its nature and where a lot of these companies are headquartered at and so on, that a lot of the storytelling had been subjugated or subordinated to expressing certain political ideologies. And for the most part, it tends to match up really well with a sort of a loose progressive ideology.
Well, let's just say it's not a coincidence that when Trump got elected or was about to get elected, or his suddenly Captain America became Hydra, which really means Captain America's a Nazi.
That was they made.
Well, I mean, the editor in chief at the time of Marvel Comics was Axel Alonso, and he said outright that he was there to save comic books, and that before he came along, comic books was just a hobby of old white guys, and just crazy stuff. I mean, that's not even as crazy as he got. So I don't wish him personally ill. I don't know him personally. I hope he landed and got a great job and is taking care of his family. But the day he left Marvel Comics, I was like, ding dong, the witch is dead. So, and it's still not perfect, but it's gotten a little better.
Well, then what I observed was that these political ideologies were so important that essentially these companies had purged anyone with a divergent view, right? And we're very public about that. We're very public.
Yeah, we're tolerance. We're completely tolerant, except the stuff we don't like.
And this is, if for no other reason, Shane, America is a huge place. And there is room for an amazing amount of diversity of thought. But we do need to celebrate and venerate free speech and the idea the idea that our neighbors matter, that people have value and worth outside of a very limited and artificial political ideology on anybody's side of the political spectrum, right? People have worth and value.
Everybody has worth and value.
Yes, yes. And as Americans, particularly since our country is so vast now and has so many different cultures within America, there are the more things that we can share in common and enjoy together, the better off we are. Because there are so many things that are so quick to divide us, right? That seem very urgent and that need that attention now, and we need to respond to these voices that say, hate your neighbor. No, we don't need to hate our neighbor. Most of us, apart from some of these phrases that we parrot, these things that are so temporary and transitory, we all love our families, right? We have more in common than we have apart. And we need stories, particularly stories of heroism, particularly stories of value. And in comic books or a beautiful piece of Americana. I mean, this is part of the American fabric. And so comic books should be broadly accessible to anyone, regardless of their ideology. And there's still room for political stories and so forth, but not every story should be forced through this lens of political purity. I mean, if you want to tell a story about resisting, this or resisting that, or with a progressive ideology on your own dime, that's fantastic. And Tim Lim does the Trump stuff, that's fantastic. It's created for a specific audience. Right. But in general, the mainstream comic books shouldn't be subjugated and made into a piece of propaganda to advance a political ideology. It should be something that is broadly accessible to anyone who can, I guess, find a place to buy a comic book anymore. Right. It should be something that we can all share and enjoy together.
And I agree with you 100%, Edwin. I started noticing, especially with Marvel comics. Now, there's always been, in some instances, comics used to try to further this or that, but it's usually been isolated to one series or one issue here and there. But a few years ago, it began permeating almost the entire Marvel line. And the measuring stick I use, Edwin, there's a rich history in comic books and in science fiction and fantasy and all that of social commentary. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. But when you cross the line into social conditioning, and that's propaganda, that's when it becomes a problem. And, you mentioned the propaganda, and that is where your primary purpose is to either program or reprogram somebody's brain, and you're using comic books as the delivery method for that. Not my primary purpose is to tell good escapist entertainment that people will enjoy. And oh, by the way, I'm going to talk about this too, but in a way that the people can evaluate it on its own merits and either accept it or reject it. And that's where it becomes a big problem. Now, you mentioned propaganda, which I was going to bring up anyways. The Chinese government it was like the 50s or 60s, observed the way kids would read comic books. Mm-hmm. And comic books, I don't have time to get into this now, psychologically interact with your brain like no other entertainment. And it all comes down to the white space in between the panels and its closure and all this. And I'll get into, people can go read Understanding Comics with Scott McCloud. But your brain, you can read the same story in a book or watch the movie of the story or read the comic book, and your brain will engage absolutely uniquely and in a different way with the comic book version. And they noticed this almost obsessive desire for kids to read comic books. And so they did some research, and the Chinese government found out it's almost the perfect medium for propaganda. And so they started putting out propaganda comic books and, to reinforce Chinese government ideology. And so Marvel, for whatever reason, started doing that same thing. Maybe not to that extreme level, but basically the same thing a few years ago.
Well, that is bizarre.
Yeah.
Because Marvel recently relaunched the Captain Marvel comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And the cover for that comic book looks exactly like a Chinese communist propaganda poster.
Oh, interesting. Now, yeah, see, I don't know. That's very interesting. I'm going to go look at that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not, now I will say I'm still troubled by a lot of the stuff going on in the industry. But I will say that Marvel's gotten a little bit better. And it could just be like, okay, we're busted. They called us out. We've got to be less obvious about what we're doing. Or maybe they're honestly trying to make a change. I don't know. But there for a while, they were as loosey-goosey squishy as you could get. And I was like, am I just being a grumpy old man here? Get off my lawn? But then I heard people like you and others saying the same thing.
Well, that's a valid observation. Here's what I did with this. So I started getting involved in commenting on things. And then I got to know the Brightwisers, and I saw in many ways how they had been threatened and coerced out of the industry. And some of these bad actors in corporate comic books were trying to make it impossible for them to earn a living.
Right.
And that made me furious because I knew the Brightwisers to be absolutely beautiful people.
And all Mitch did was post an image he drew without comment or caption of Trump holding a flaming sword. That's all he did. And oh my goodness. Edwin, let's talk about IndieCron.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So tell us about IndieCron.
So let me give you the short story of the origin of IndieCron. When people like Diversity in Comics and all these other people started launching their comic books, there's a resource on the web called Comicron, which tracks the sales data of the direct market. How many comic books are sold to comic books.
Which I have to say that those are hard to get those numbers. It's fuzzy math at the very least, because it just depends on who reports what. And also Marvel or whoever, let's call it Amazing Comic Book Company B. That's the name of the comic book company. They'll say, we sold or shipped 1 million copies of Amazing, Captain Arachnid #1, the legacy relaunch reboot 4.0. And they'll say we shipped 1 million. All that means is that they somehow got comic book stores to order 1 million. We have no idea how many sold through to actual customers. And comic book companies or comic book stores can no longer send back unsold product. Now Alterna will let them, but other than that, no.
This is the fundamental difference.
Right.
This is the fundamental difference between the legacy comic book industry and crowdfunded comic books. In the legacy comic book industry, and by that I mean Image, I mean Marvel, I mean DC, I mean all these large comic book companies, their primary customer is the comic book stores.
Right.
That is their customer.
Right.
So they are abstracted from the actual readers of the comic books. With the crowdfunded market, and I'm talking about Jawbreakers, I'm talking about Cyberfrog Blood Honey, I am talking about the Brightwisers' Glorious Red Rooster. Their customer is the reader. And so every single one of those projects that gets backed, somebody lays some money down on the table. Each and every one of those comic books is desired, wanted, and will soon have a home with a reader who will value it and treasure it.
Right. So it's a direct, that's one of the best things about crowdfunding is, it allows things to be made that may not otherwise, because you're bypassing, although the crowdfunding site kind of becomes a middleman, but it allows creators to, work directly with their customers and potential customers. And two, it allows, like you said, it removes this whole weird diamond distribution thing from the comic book thing. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to give you the short answer of IndieCron.
IndieCron, okay. Yes.
So My education is actually in business analysis. Okay. And so that is one of the things that I do for the company I work for. So I like metrics. I like data. And so I started tracking the performance of these various crowdfunded campaigns on an Excel spreadsheet because I wanted to be able to compare them in some meaningful way to what was being sold by established corporate comic books. I tracked that personally, and then I would share my observations on Twitter. Now, someone volunteered to host that online, and so I transitioned that to a Google spreadsheet. Now, technologically speaking, I am a boomer. I am a Luddite. And so I was doing all this manual data entry, right? Every day I would have to devote about half an hour to go in, check the campaigns, update the entries, and so forth. A gentleman by the name of Pixel Trader, who is a technological wizard, said, "Hey, Ed, tell me what you're doing here." And when he found out what I was doing, he was horrified. And he was saying, "Please stop punishing yourself this way. If you give me your permission, I will start up a website and I'll host all this." And I said, that's amazing, because I wanted to be able to share this with other people and get these links out so there would be another place where people could discover all this rich material, all this fresh material that was being created for comics lovers, right? And that perhaps was not entering into their awareness. So he took that and ran with it and just did a fantastic job. And that became a site called IndieCron.com.
And that's INDIECRON. Is that right?
CRON. Yes.
Okay.
IndieCron. All right. Now this is specifically to serve comic creators and comic lovers and consumers who are interested in Comicsgate. And I'm not really interested in a rigid ideological purity test. If a creator tells me he's interested in serving Comicsgate, providing comic books to them, then I will take him at his word for it. And so it's been a wild success. From Pixel Trader's metrics, he's got a unique key. So when we share a link from IndieCron, we can tell if a person clicking through, if that winds up converting to a sale. And so IndieCron.com, over about a 4-month period, was able to create $50,000 worth of conversions, and primarily not for these large campaigns, but for some of these small and mid-sized creators who are perhaps publishing their very first comic book. And so I have a lot of pride in Pixel Trader in what he was able to do, because his efforts may have meant the difference between some of these small and first-time comic book creators and self-publishers succeeding or failing. And that's an amazing thing.
Well, cool. Yeah, I really like the concept of what you're doing here. So I'll describe real quick. The first time I went and looked at IndieCron is when you tweeted a couple of weeks ago that you were becoming involved in some leadership and guidance on IndieCron, and I went and took a look, and I was like, oh, I really want to talk to Edwin about this. One, because I like to talk to Edwin, but two, because this is a, well, again, I say a positive result of comic. Let's find solutions and let's highlight stuff and not just, get into, not just argue or whatever. So, and I'll just describe people to see, you hit the site, there's some stuff at the top that looks like IndieCron store. Underneath that, there's sort of, it looks like some highlighted campaigns that rotates, little images. And then under that, you get right to the list, active campaigns. And I think that's smart because, and a lot of times for web design, less is more. Get out of the way and get right to the point. And this landing page gets out of the way and gets right to the point. Here are the current, Comicsgate related crowdfunding, comic book projects, and it says it'll list the project. It's very easy to read. It's like a table with rows. You can back it now on Indiegogo or I'm assuming whatever platform it's on. What is it, just Indiegogo, or will other platforms get on here? Or?
For the moment, it is just Indiegogo.
Okay.
Most Comicsgate consumers are accustomed to seeing projects on Indiegogo.
Okay.
And then Pixel Trader has been able to automate that process where we can pull data directly from Indiegogo. He's built a relationship with them, and they've exposed certain features of the API to him.
Nice. Well, yeah, and I've heard there's a couple of things now. I'm not super familiar. I'm speaking from secondhand information at best on this, a big grain of salt. I know that fairly recently, within the past few months, Kickstarter evidently hired somebody to review the moral or political appropriateness of certain campaigns. So, almost like a gatekeeper on, like, is your comic book, evil? And I'm being, I'm exaggerating to make the point, but, and at that point, a lot of people said, you know what? Thank you, Kickstarter, for what you've done in the past, but we're going to move on. And at that point, a lot of stuff shifted over to Indiegogo. And I've heard that Indiegogo has really realized this comic book crowdfunding segment and is really working to help that, from what I understand.
Yeah, so far they have treated most creators very well. Again, there's limited customer support for some of these projects. And the reality of the world is that the large movers, because the way these crowdfunding services work is they take a cut. They take some percentage of
they're the middleman.
Sales.
Right.
Yeah. And so they're going to give more attention to people who are making more money for them. That's just the reality of the world.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
IndieCron.com, though, again, is an aggregator and listing site, and we are not monetized, and we don't plan to monetize because we want to avoid the scenario of ever appearing that it is a pay-to-play service. Yeah. We want to present what's available to people. We want to help them discover creators and creations that are in alignment, that want to show that respect to consumers and say, hey, we value you. Give us a chance to entertain you with a good comic book. And so we don't want to create any obstacles or barriers to that functioning. So IndieCron.com probably will never be monetized. If it does become monetized, it would have to be in such a way that it doesn't detract from anybody's enjoyment of the site. And again, it carefully and rigorously avoids in creating like a payola or a pay-to-play type of scenario. That's critical.
See, the problem with if you're trying to be as pure as possible in supporting what some would call Comicsgate creators, I still prefer Move the Needle, but that didn't catch on, as much as I wanted it to. But Comicsgate is basically saying Comicsgate is an understood adjective now or label for, go ahead.
I've got a solution to that.
Yeah.
And here's my solution to that. We have formed a corporation, and the corporation has 3 partners. It is Ben Henderson from Cautionary Comics, who is a vastly successful businessman.
Now, he does the jungle stuff with Chuck Dixon, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Ravage, Kill All Men.
Right.
He's a serial entrepreneur. He is a computer security expert, but he has got his finger in like such a wide-ranging range of different business enterprises. Just a vastly successful man, but he likes to geek out. He when he was on the road working on his various business ventures over the past 2 decades, he wrote 40-some different stories.
Wow. And
now he's in the process of getting them turned into comic books. And he loves to geek out with comic book artists, with comic book writers. And so we kind of recognized some of the particular limitations of IndieCron. It's a great service. But I want to be able to do more. And so I formed a partnership with Ben Henderson, Pixel Trader, and myself called Sunshine Ventures. Later this year, we're going to be standing up a website called Indie Focused. indie focused. Now, that's not going to be just limited to comic books. It is not Comicsgate exclusive. It is going to have comic books. It is going to have games. It's going to have music. It is going to do a couple of things. On one side of it, it will have a listing and aggregation service.
Which is what IndieCron is right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyway.
Right.
Okay.
In addition to that, Ben right now is about 85% complete with coding a Patreon style service, right? A Patreon style service where individual enthusiasts can directly support a particular creator or person in their particular endeavors, right? So we wanted to have something that was decoupled from political ideology and wasn't under the oversight or purview of people who could be politically coerced. So we're going to have a Patreon style service. We're also going to have our own crowdfunding service, which will be similar to Indiegogo or Kickstarter or these various crowdfunding services.
And that's Sunshine. You said Sunshine Ventures?
Sunshine Ventures.
Now I have to ask, is it SUN or SON?
It is with a U.
Okay.
I live in beautiful Hawaii.
Right. The Sunshine. Is it the Sunshine State?
Pixel Trader lives in lovely California.
Yeah.
And Ben Henderson lives in the Sunshine State in Florida.
Florida's Sunshine State. Okay. That's funny. Yeah. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah, so we are Sunshine Ventures. Now, along with that, indie focused next year, we are in the process of organizing a comic convention called Rockin' Con. And so we're going to have like a big outdoor Comic Con convention with tents, with live performers, obviously Rockin' Con. We're going to do something that's a little bit more fun. We're going to have adult beverages, all kinds of fun. That's going to be in Florida in 2020. Ben has made good headway on that. And then when we kick that off, I'm going to go down there and MC a couple of events.
That sounds fun. If I can at all be there, I will. And if I can help promote, definitely let me know. I'm glad to. So IndieCron is, for now, I mean, that's all some very cool stuff coming down the road. And that was one of my questions. What do you see coming? So you've already answered that. For IndieCron, again, it's an aggregator. And what that means is there is a set of search parameters of it basically Google searches Indiegogo for you and puts a list there based on Indiegogo very, very nicely exposing a little bit of their API to, is it Pixel Trader? Pixel Trader. And it's just a nice, easy to read list of what's out there. You get to see the title. You get to see who the creator is. You get to see a picture. You see how many backers it has. I guess the status is that the day that it closes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You get to see the genre, which I used to say genre growing up. And you get to see how much it's funded and what the initial goal was. And then
one of the things that's important to me, is across the top on the banner, we show you campaigns that are ending soon.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay.
So we don't want people to miss out on a chance to be a part of something that they might love. And it's a very noisy space. And so I just want to give a chance to some of these campaigns.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of amazing stuff that for whatever reason doesn't get this particular attention. So we want to give every project the best possible chance to succeed and to be, manifested into reality. And what is reality? Well, it's a comic book.
Yeah, of course.
In your mailbox, and you've got it in your hands, and you're sitting down reading it, and you're having a great time. That's what we want to see happen for as many people as possible.
So, it's great. And, you were mentioning the background noise. It's the same issue that indie video game creators run into. Steam provided this amazing platform for development teams, anywhere from 1 to 1,000 indie, whatever, to get, and all indie means is really, you're not working with one of the big companies out there. That's really all indie means. But in the case of these comic books, it's probably sole proprietor creators or, a partnership of 2 or 3. But on Steam, there's so much to choose from that when your game first releases, evidently, if you don't make a lot of money in that first hour or two, forget it, because then you're just buried under the avalanche of other games. So I don't think that the comic book crowdfunding is to that point, but you're solving that. You're like, hey, here's a chance for people not to get lost in the shuffle. And, oh, by the way, when this only has a little bit of time left, we're going to highlight it.
Yeah.
That's great.
On a personal level, I try to keep my eyes open for campaigns. With some of these smaller creators, if I have the time, I may try and make a promotional video for them right out of the gate.
I see you do that. It looks great.
For some of the others, I try to do like a mid-campaign video when the initial hit or the initial awareness of something may have waned a little bit. I want to remind people that there's this stuff out here, and hey, check it out, because it might be something that you would love.
Yeah, and you're really good at those. You've inspired me to do a couple, and I enjoyed doing it, and mine were okay, but you've definitely, yours are more polished and experienced. Probably my best promotional video that I enjoyed the most was completely spontaneous, where I was taking care of a neighbor's chickens. And so I did chicken on the street Red Rooster interviews, where I was interviewing the chickens on whether they're like, yes, he's a hunk. We'll support his book. We love the Red Rooster. So,
that was fantastic.
Yeah. And that was completely spontaneous. I was like, I've got my camera on, or I've got my phone on me. So anyway, another thing people can do here at IndieCron is, the main tab shows you everything that's in the list, in a table. You can look at, what's active, and it'll only show you what's active. You can look at in demand. Now, what is the definition of in demand? Yeah.
All right. So now this is terminology that's coming over from Indiegogo itself.
Okay.
When a campaign is active, whenever somebody starts up a campaign on Indiegogo, they designate an amount of time for it. And it might be 15 days, it might be 30 days, it might be 2 months, but it's some discrete period of time. That is when a campaign is active. Now, it may have already been successfully funded, but it's still in its active phase. What in demand is, if a campaign is successful, after its active phase, a creator or the owner of the campaign can choose to leave it in in-demand mode. Now, some tiers or perks may not be available, but people can essentially support or back on some level for some indeterminate amount of time. This works particularly well with comic books, because when a lot of people are launching comic book campaigns, they may have their story, a cover, and perhaps a handful of concept art. And maybe I always encourage people, when they launch, they should have no less than five fully drawn, colored, inked and lettered pages, right? But they may still have like 90% of the comic book to create. And that takes a little bit of time. And so during that interim, if they leave their campaign in in-demand mode, people can continue to discover them and determine if this might be something that they would love while the comic book is in the production and fulfillment phase.
Nice.
Right? So that's what in demand means.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And another thing I want to point out here, again, Pixel Trader nailed it. What I call the Google philosophy: get out of the way, get the information on there, use a lot of white space. So when you first hit it, you get the list, but it's actually much more nuanced and sortable than you might realize at the beginning. When you click on, when you start clicking around, like I said, you can get into all active, in demand. You can go to the all time list, and then the all time list will further break down. You can look at closed, in fulfillment, fulfilled, active. And then on the bottom, at the bottom of every list on every page, there's except now it's not in the, all time, but in the other areas, that is active, in demand, all active and in demand. If you scroll down, you also get a list of upcoming campaigns to get an idea of what's coming soon, so you can prepare for that.
And on most devices, across a small across a very small tab on the top, there is an upcoming.
Yeah, let me look at that on my phone real quick.
Push on, and it's a little rocket ship. It'll have a little. rocket ship.
Okay, yeah. It looks like on desktop the way that the responsive media queries are working is it's moving upcoming. But as you're scrolling, you will see upcoming on the desktop. It does pop up. But it sounds like on mobile, it's you have that little icon you can hit. Yeah, this is great, Edwin. I think this is a great idea. It doesn't try to overcomplicate what it is. And if you're interested in any of these, you click on the link and it takes you right to Indiegogo. And you can do all your business with Indiegogo. IndieCron's not trying to take a slice. They're trying to help. And it looks like if you want to help IndieCron, there is a store, an IndieCron store. And then at the bottom, on the bottom footer, there's a donate. I guess people could donate if they want to help out. So, you want to speak a little bit about that?
Well, now this has been a labor of love for Pixel Trader. He hand coded all this site. He paid for a server for 2 years. And so he's invested a lot of time and effort in his particular skill for this. He's a professional coder. And so this is what he does for a living.
I've been doing websites and coding and front end and back end development since the 90s. And getting to here is a lot harder than people think. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Along with that, he's developed personal relationships and personal communications with Indiegogo to expose parts of the API and stuff. Hey, there's one more thing I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one of the valuable parts of Indiegogo, or excuse me, IndieCron.com, you can go on there and find successful campaigns, and you can model your particular campaign on other people's successful campaigns, right? Doesn't mean exactly copy it. You've got to make it work for you, but you can look and see what the successful elements are. Now, don't model yourself after a big celebrity like Ethan Van Sciver or like Richard C. Meyer. Look at somebody in the mid-tier who's maybe taking the same journey that you hope to take and emulate them. So what I point people at a lot is to go look at that Battle Maiden Knuckle Bomb campaign.
What a great name. Battle Maiden Knuckle Bomb. All right. So Battle Maiden Knuckle Bomb. And also, as long as, you're kind of going into that area, part of the discussion, I want to point out Kickstarters and Indiegogos and all this are a lot of work. So don't, if you want to be, there's 0.00001% of the time can you make money and fulfill your dreams without working your tail off. So it just doesn't happen. I've never run a crowdfunding campaign, but I know so many people who have, and interviewed a lot of people who have. Yeah, here's Battle Maiden Knuckle Bomb, not Bum. I'm checking this out right now. It's a lot of work. And then you still have to deliver your product after you have a successful campaign. So yeah, Battle Maiden Knuckle Bomb, by Kyung Lee is at, 37,000. He's 911% funded, and Battle Maiden Knuckle Bomb will give you a knuckle sandwich. It looks like. So, yeah,
I point to him because this is his first project.
Yeah.
This is his first, as far as I can tell, he is the most successful crowdfunded manga on Indiegogo.
Yep.
And so vastly successful, but this is his first project. So it's like being called up from the minor leagues to the New York Yankees on your very first at bat in Yankee Stadium. You hit a game-winning grand slam to win the World Series. This is what Kyung Lee has done.
Wow. And it's a good-looking campaign. I mean, it looks professional. You scroll through the campaign, you know exactly what you're getting. Like you said, he had a certain amount of finished art he could show, good description. All right. Well, Edwin, to respect your time, you've gone about double what you initially had, said that you could do. And I've enjoyed talking with you, but I humbly apologize for my part in taking you longer. IndieCron, IndieCron.com. Go check it out. It's cool stuff. They're not trying to make money off of anything, because human nature being what it is, somebody would come along and try to take advantage of that for, well, just this one time, we'll bump it up. And so no problem for that. If somebody wants to get listed, there is a submit now link. Yep. And then and you said also, I mean, in some cases, if you or somebody else sees something that you like, you'll go ahead and put it on there, or like, what is your role? I know you're taking some more leadership and direction duties.
So I'm helping to act as a public face for it, right? To set a tone. And then I had to do, for all these things, it takes a little bit of work, because we've got volunteers that want to help us, but I just want to make sure that we have the policies in place, that protect our consumers, but also protect our volunteers. Right. Anybody who wants to engage in a labor of love and help people promote the success of all these various ventures, right? These stories, then they need to have a certain fundamental amount of courtesy extended to them too, because IndieCron IndieCron.com doesn't have customers. It has users. Mm-hmm. It has users in a community. It's not a commercial. It's a portal. Source.
It is a portal. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it is aggregate portal. So, and one thing, I've volunteered at various times, for various charities and nonprofits. A volunteer doesn't mean, hey, I'll help out how I feel like helping out. I may show up, I may not. A volunteer is basically an unpaid employee who's doing it because they care about what's going on. So there's a certain amount of professionalism and expectation that should be there.
Yeah. And so it has to be somebody who has a heart for service, but is willing to conduct themselves in such a way, because God forbid that we should ever become a barrier to someone's success because of our words, and we certainly never want to be a detriment to anybody. Right. So everybody who works with us has to be willing kind of to adhere to that and put their ego off to the side.
I love it. And that's something that I admire in you personally, is I can tell, like you said, you used to, back in the Army, you're kind of an angry young man. You're one of those people I can tell has become seasoned. God has worked on, you've done your best to polish sounds wrong, to moderate yourself and not, let your emotions rule you. So, but at the same time, when you need emotion to give energy to something that you're trying to do, I can tell it's there. But I have nothing but respect to your approach when talking and dealing with difficult subjects. There was a convention, I think it was Little Rock Comic Con. I was up there with, Mark was there, Tim was there, and their promotion, I don't mean to diss anybody. They have a promotion company they work with, was there as well. And we were all talking, this was about a year ago, a little less than a year. And we were all talking about what was going on with Comicsgate. And at that point, it was all the creators and everybody were in this one big unified bubble, right? Everybody was in the same foxhole. And we were talking and I said, guys, here's what's going to happen. I said, Comicsgate is definitely going to go on to shape the upcoming comics industry. When you chop down a tree and you see the eras of the trees of the years that it lived in, you said, well, there was a dry year here and there was you could count the rings and all that and see the tree's history. Comicsgate is going to be part of the strata of comic books moving forward, the history of comic books, because it's affecting people now and it's going to ripple up. I said, but one or two things is going to happen. Either A, you're all going to come together and with strong leadership and whatnot, and you're going to basically be the next Image Comics. Or egos and infighting is going to happen and it's going to shatter into about 5 or 6 different islands. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I've seen some shattering. But you may have a different perspective, But no matter what, I've maintained from the beginning that good stuff's going to come out of this. And IndieCron and your approach and Sunshine Productions and all that is a perfect example of good stuff coming out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, this is so new for a lot of people. And you have all these ad hoc associations. So something I did about a month ago, I made a commitment to myself to be ruthlessly positive. So
I love that.
I spent a season criticizing and sometimes even being very provocative towards Marvel and DC.
I did the same thing. And then I saw, what's the point in winning if all that's left is a nuclear waste?
Well, and something else that I realized, over time, they made it clear to me, unequivocal, that my particular opinions and vision of what I wanted to see in comic books, they made it clear to me that I wasn't valued as a customer. And that's okay. That's okay. That's part of our great freedom and liberty here in the United States. Not everybody is selling the thing that you want, right?
Right.
And if they want another customer base, God bless them. So there was limited utility. There was limited utility to that criticism. And I cannot spend another year just focused on criticism that doesn't produce any fruits, right? There must be something that's manifested into reality through hard work, determination, and through execution. And so I said, there are people, there are voices who are very good at criticizing these companies and things, but I don't see anything directly coming from that criticism. In fact, a lot of times I see it devolving down into these kind of nastiness or fights or things or issues that don't reflect who I want to be as a person and the message I want to share with the world. So then what I need to do is focus on helping people actually create and do things and get noticed. And there's so much fresh stuff coming out. I don't particularly care anymore what DC and Marvel do with their particular products. After a couple of years of that, your factors of nostalgia, your connection to these characters, it gets broken and decoupled. And once that happens, how much energy are you willing to commit the next 5 years to complaining about something that's never coming back?
Right. Right. 100%. Yeah. It goes from genuine, valid concern to you've turned into a broken record that's bitter and cynical. And you're just kvetching to kvetch at that point. So, one thing we were talking earlier, very early in our discussion about our faith and our Christianity, I'm still very much a work in progress, Edwin. I get it wrong every day on some level. Sometimes purposefully because I'm a selfish sinner, and then sometimes without meaning to. But one thing that God has taught me is that other people, all however many billions of people, all 6 billion, whatever on this world, they are not extras in my movie. They are full people, just like I am. They are their own universes unto themselves. And so when I'm blasting somebody or just doing a flippant elbow drop on them, I'm not respecting that. And I can disagree with somebody while still saying like you said earlier, you deserve respect, you deserve dignity, Like, again, Axel Alonso, I absolutely didn't want him guiding Marvel Comics. I don't wish him ill. I just didn't want him in that position, so I'm trying to make it about the issue and not the person. Yes. Yeah. So, okay. Well, to wrap us up, I had 2 questions here that you can answer or not, depending on whether you even want to answer them or if you have time, because I know your wife probably wants to have breakfast with you now. The first questions are, what are 3 current comics you recommend and why, whether they are Comicsgate comics or not? And then also, I was going to say, if you wanted to speak to the swatting thing, you're welcome to, but, by no means is that a main topic of this show. So did you want to answer either of those?
3 current comic books. You can go grab any 3 comics from Alterna, and you will probably do very well. I haven't followed it closely. The new Daredevil series from Marvel had some interesting things about it. A lot of this stuff just does not. Again, once that connection is broken, and you understand that characters and stories will be subordinated to any particular thing, and that the creators of the comic series will become a detriment to your escapism, and aren't interested in building something that will extend into the future, that anything can be retconned at any time to serve the particular promotional strategy of the month. I can't really recommend any particular corporate comic right at the moment. They're almost irrelevant to me now. On the swatting.
And let's define, just in case people don't know, I'm sorry to interrupt you on such an important topic. Just in case people don't know, when you swat somebody, and this used to happen a lot in the video game and Twitter world or Twitch world, and it's spilling over into other areas, including comic book creators. That is when you call an emergency service, normally a SWAT team or something, and use certain words that will initiate a certain level of response, like self-harm, psychotic, suicidal, hostages. And then a SWAT team literally breaks into your house unexpectedly. And I don't believe the intent is literally to kill anybody. I think it's more of just a nasty, immature, jerky prank thing to do, but people have been killed and harmed, and it could happen. So it's no joking matter at all. And this happened to Edwin and his wife recently, about a week after Peter Samedi from Alterna Comics was swatted. So having said that, and your response was amazing, Edwin.
Well, what I would tell people, if I see something that makes you so angry that you want to harm me or harm anyone else for that moment, first take a breath and then go use your ideas. You know, if it's so important to harm me or some other person, you know, just provide good, compelling, charismatic arguments why you believe that what me or some other person is espousing is no good, right? And then that could potentially lessen my influence or lessen other people's reading or consuming whatever I have to say, right? That's fair game. That's fair game. If you get to the point where you want to cause physical harm to somebody or harm somebody yourself, please stop, because you can unalterably harm your own life, and not only your own life with the potential legal repercussions. We see that someone, I think, was just sentenced to about 20 years in prison for making these false calls.
Yeah, I just shared that out yesterday, the day before. He was a serial swatter. He swatted 20 times, and in one of those cases, somebody was killed.
And so the officers who responded to my house, they were told that I had murdered my wife and wanted to harm other people.
Unbelievable.
And so these officers, thankfully, they were highly professional. Thankfully, I responded to them in a very calm space. But what could have happened is perhaps not only the harm that someone desired to cause to me, but you would have inalterably changed that officer's life if they had accidentally discharged a firearm and struck one of the other officers or had shot me. That would have effectively ruined their life and just created all kinds of pain and heartache for them. And so even if you don't care or feel empathy for the person you want to harm, understand that you're putting not only that person at risk, but innocent people, neighbors, the officers, and all their families at extreme risk also. And so even if you can't feel sympathy or empathy for me as a human being, try to feel it for these other people whose lives and livelihoods that you're putting in jeopardy.
And it's a very serious situation. I don't want to imply that it's just a haha little prank. I based on my understanding of swatting, a lot of the stuff I saw happen on Twitch, I hope, and I try to look at the best side of human nature I can, even in a bad situation. I'm really hoping the motive is not seriously to get somebody shot. But the motive is definitely to disrupt, to cause mental trauma. I mean, I know if a SWAT team busted into my house, my wife and kid would be traumatized from that. Whether, go ahead.
Thankfully, they didn't kick down the door. It was about 5 a.m. in the morning. I heard a knock. I opened the door. I was in my boxers, and I had the team aligned there, and
yeah,
at least 5 hard-faced men with their pistols
right.
pointed at my body. It was which kind of brought me instantly awake.
Yeah, but that'll have that effect, won't it?
Thank God I spent 8 years in the Army, and I'm used to being around firearms. I'm used to firing and shooting, and I'm just trying to convey calm. And whatever they instructed me to do, I executed immediately in a calm fashion, and trying to give them every reassurance that it was okay to de-escalate the situation.
And that's the key, de-escalate. In the middle of a situation, even if you know your rights upside and down and this and that, don't throw up your arms and say, I pay your taxes, get out of my house. You go de-escalate, and there will be an opportunity for Q&A to figure out what the heck is going on.
Yeah. And none of these things actually get solved right at that time.
Right.
And so even if you're completely in the right, even if you know your rights backwards and forwards, in a highly charged emotional state,
right,
when the safeties are off and men's fingers are on the trigger, bring it down. All this other stuff can be sorted out after the effect, and it may be a temporary disconvenience, and maybe it hurts your pride, but save lives, save your own life, and then work it out. And contentious things and difficult things are better worked out by calm and clear heads in the right setting for that. And so please protect your own life, protect your own well-being, and even the lives and the well-being of the men who have been dispatched.
Because in a sense, they've been swatted as well. They're being misused.
Yes, they were the officers. All these guys, I could see it in their faces after they realized it wasn't real. There was anger, there was frustration, there was disgust, but you could see the adrenaline flooding out of them and that sigh of relief. But at the same time, you could see their disgust at being used by someone and the danger that they had been exposed to.
Absolutely. So let's wrap up. I just want to say, I'm trying to err on the side of thinking that people aren't trying to get people killed. Maybe in some cases they are, but regardless of the motive, the outcome can be the same. So it's a very, very, very serious situation. And, like Edwin says, if you're listening to this and by some chance have ever thought about swatting somebody, please don't. You have no idea what may or may not go down. And 2, if you're ever the victim of a swatting situation or a situation where for some reason the police are taking control of the situation, keep calm, be cool. They will question you once they have control of the situation. So, all right, Edwin. So we've been talking about IndieCron. That's IndieCron.com. It is a Comicsgate hub /aggregator to allow you to find all the good stuff in Comicsgate /Indie Comics at the moment. Any final thoughts from lovely Hawaii, Mr. Edwin?
Every day is your chance to connect with your creator, right?
Yes.
And something one of my pastors told me one time. He said, when you walk through the church door, it's fantastic if you come in here and you get a blessing. But it's even better if you leave a blessing, if you bless somebody else. So whatever your particular skills are, whatever your interests, your passions, if you can increase the amount of joy, empathy, and love in the world, don't miss your opportunity to do so.
Amen, brother. Keep doing it. I have nothing but respect for you. But anyway, Edwin, that's it, man. I appreciate your time. I know we went way beyond time, but you were so you were so gracious about it. And trust me, there's people out there that want to know more about you. And I think the podcast, full podcast version of this show will be very popular and a good record of who you are.
Cool. Well, cool. It was fun. It was fun getting a chance to sit down and talk with you for a while, brother.
All right, man. Thank you. Likewise, nothing but a pleasure. It's just in some ways, this is a very fun, exciting time to be in comics, despite, some of the negative that's gone on. But anyway, man, have a great day. Tell your wife thank you for allowing me to have some of your time this morning and have some of her time with you. And we will catch you soon on the interwebs. Take care, Edwin.
Aloha, brother.
Aloha. Shane Plays here with some chicken on the street interviews. I'm going to find out what these chickens think of the Red Rooster. Okay, chickens, what do you think of the new Red Rooster Golden Age? Yeah? Okay. Are you going to support it on Indiegogo? Red Rooster Golden Age? All right. Oh, no. Who is it? Shane Plays Chicken on the Street interviews. May I come in? Yes. Oh, there. Okay. Well, where are you going? Now, these are obviously chickens of high intelligence and taste. What do y'all think of Red Rooster Golden Age? He's the hunkiest hero ever, and you should support him. What the cluck are you waiting for? Support the Red Rooster Golden Age by Mitch Breitweiser and Betty Breitweiser and Mark Pellegrini on Indiegogo. Now, we love him so much. He's so hunky. We wish he was our rooster. Well, there you have it, folks. Right from the chicken's mouth. We got, well, hello, ma'am. Are you a little camera shy there? Yes, I'm a little camera shy, but I love Red Rooster. He's so hunky. I love his feathers and his crown and his spurs. Now, ma'am, I don't mind telling you, you're a little strange looking, but I love you anyway. That's okay, I hear that a lot. Make sure to support Red Rooster Golden Age on Indiegogo. And folks, there you have it, the chicken on the street interview from Shane Plays. Bye. Bye, chickens. Bye-bye, chickens. Bye-bye, chicken. Bye-bye.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.